Harvard education, MBA. Senior executive at Merrill Lynch, praised by his former CEO for his, quote, business savvy, leadership skills, sound judgment, and personal integrity. Featured on Crain's 40 Under 40 list of the most successful business people in America. He was so successful, he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. By 2008, his bankruptcy filing read, "I currently have no income." His name was Richard Fuscone, and his story is the most uncomfortable counter to every success requires education narrative you have ever been told. Morgan Housel introduces Richard Fuscone in the same opening pages of The Psychology of Money, where he tells the story of Ronald Reed. The two men are presented as deliberate contrasts. Where Ronald Reed was a janitor with no formal education, Fuscone was Harvard educated. Where Reed worked 30-plus years in modest jobs, Fuscone retired in his 40s as a wealthy senior executive. Where Reed drove a used pickup truck, Fuscone owned a sprawling Connecticut mansion the size of a small hotel. The mansion details are documented in the public record and quoted by Housel. 18,000 square feet, 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages, costing over $90,000 a month just to maintain, more in monthly upkeep than most American families earn in a year of total income. Fuscone, Housel writes, had borrowed heavily to expand it. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, the leverage that had built the mansion turned into the leverage that destroyed it. The crisis hurt almost every investor. It apparently turned Fuscone's finances into dust. In 2008, he told a bankruptcy judge, and Housel quotes him directly, "I currently have no income." First, Fuscone's Palm Beach house was foreclosed. Then, in 2014, the Connecticut mansion was auctioned off for 75% less than the property's insurance valuation. 5 months before Ronald Reed died, Richard Fuscone watched his life's largest asset sold at fire sale prices. The same year that Ronald Reed, the gas station janitor with no degree, died and gave $8 million to his local hospital and library, Richard Fuscone, the Harvard MBA, the Merrill Lynch executive, the philanthropist, had nothing left. Housel's framing of the contrast is one of the cleanest sentences in the book. Ronald Reed was patient. Richard Fuscone was greedy. That, Housel writes, was all it took to eclipse the massive education and experience gap between the two. A janitor outperformed a Harvard MBA. The variable that produced the gap was not knowledge. It was behavior. Housel uses the Reed versus Fuscone contrast to make one of the most uncomfortable arguments in the entire book. In every other field on earth, formal education and experience deliver predictable results. A Harvard-trained surgeon performs surgery better than a janitor. An Intel engineer designs microchips better than a gas station mechanic. Ronald Reed, by all accounts, could not have done either of those things. But in finance, Housel insists, the rules are completely different. Finance is not a hard science. It is what he calls a soft skill, a domain where how you behave matters dramatically more than what you formally know. Fuscone knew everything Reed did not know. He had access to information, advisors, and instruments that Reed could not have imagined. None of it mattered because he did not have the one thing that Reed did have: the discipline to live below his means, the patience to let compounding work, the humility to never assume that today's wealth would last. Watch how this pattern repeats in your own circle before it repeats in your own life. The pattern Fuscone followed is not rare. It is the dominant pattern of high-earning professional families in every developed economy. A high salary normalizes lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation invites debt to bridge the gap between what you spend and what you earn. Debt creates fragility, and fragility is what turns one bad year, a recession, a job loss, a health event, a market crash, into a permanent setback. The Harvard MBA does not protect you from this pattern. The senior executive title does not protect you from this pattern. The retirement at 40 does not protect you from this pattern. As Housel demonstrates with Fuscone, the higher you climb on the income ladder, the more sophisticated the version of this trap becomes, and often the deeper the leverage that fuels it. Think of one person you know who is genuinely brilliant at their craft, but whose financial life feels strangely fragile. A senior executive carrying enormous lifestyle debt. A successful founder whose net worth depends entirely on one company's valuation. A specialist whose monthly burn rate makes retirement mathematically impossible. The pattern Fuscone followed is the dominant pattern of high-earning professional families today. Education does not protect you from it. Sometimes it accelerates it. If you read that paragraph and immediately recognized someone, that is the point of this episode. The Fuscone story is, fundamentally, the same story as the tech executives. Wealth without behavioral discipline is borrowed time. 3 concrete moves drawn directly from the Fuscone-Reed contrast. 1. Never let your housing costs scale automatically with your income. The single most consistent wealth killer in every developed economy is housing cost creep. Each promotion brings a bigger house, which brings a bigger mortgage, which brings a bigger fragility. Pick your housing target once and let your income outpace it for decades. That gap is wealth. 2. Refuse to use your education as a substitute for behavior. A finance degree, an MBA, a CFA, a top-tier consulting experience. None of them protect you from the basic behavioral failures that destroyed Fuscone. The fancier your credentials, the more dangerous your blind spot, because you will be tempted to believe credentials substitute for discipline. They do not. 3. Start tracking your savings rate, not your net worth. Net worth is the result. Savings rate is the cause. Reed had a high savings rate. Fuscone had a low one. The $8 million gap between them was the compound effect of that single ratio over 5 decades. If you watched this and immediately pictured someone in your own life, hit subscribe. The next story is exactly the math behind why. The next in the series is the most viral statistic in the entire book. The most legendary investor in modern history is worth $84.5 billion, and 96% of that wealth came after his 50th birthday. The math behind that one number rewrites how every working investor should think about their retirement. We will see you in the next Yield Tales episode.